Well, good morning. I will call our February meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. We have a couple of retirees this morning, and I don't know when we're going to maybe do the presentation of some of the awards that Embark received last night, so maybe we can do that after the retirement. So let me come down front. All right, thank you. Our first retirement is Mary Kay Fox, and spent the last 21 years in Special Services Administrator. And we've kind of given her, as I understand, a little special contract to help train. And Jason said, you know, we thought she'd retired, but she'd been here the last 2 weeks, and so really hadn't retired yet, apparently. But Mary Kay, yeah, if you'd come up, please. This retirement resolution for your 21 years of service from Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, and just thanking you for your many years of service, and hope you enjoy retirement.
I will, I'm sure.
If you quit working, if you'll quit working. And I always put everybody on the spot. You need to tell me one thing that we've really done well and one thing you'd change or improve.
Okay. Well, I think over the past few years we've done everything really well. I'm very proud of how far we've come in a short time. So I can't think of anything really specific. I just think everything's going really great.
Well, tell us a minute just what you've done in Special Services helping the community.
In Special Services, we give transportation to people who might not otherwise have transportation. People with disabilities and seniors. We have some special programs for homeless people and low-income people. And it's just a good feeling to know that you can help people like that.
Well, good. What can we do better?
Okay. I think I have to give the same answer. Just keep on doing what you're doing now, because it's really going great.
Well, good. Well,
and, look forward to more improvements.
All right. Well, thank you. I think he wants to take a picture here if you want to. I don't know how good photographer he is, but he's grinning like he's doing a good job. So, did you get it? All right. All right, Mary. Thank you very much. Bill, or I only know if the retirees are here because you're a stranger in the crowd, a strange face in the crowd. So, but I guess you spent the past 14 years as an operator of the downtown trolley. Prior to that, you were retired military, and I know you're probably looking forward to retirement.
Moving down to Norman and driving their buses, so.
Well, then that doesn't sound like retirement, because it's
a trolley that hasn't retired. So.
Well, they said you were moving closer to your family or something, maybe.
Yeah, well, I live in Norman, so it's just down the street.
Well, good.
They're working on Highway 9, so it takes as long to get to work as it does up here. So.
So you'll be driving the trolley around campus? Is that where theirs
the
operates?
Campus trolley, and they've expanded their routes quite a bit. So
In Norman?
In Norman,
More
yeah.
than just the campus?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All over.
All right. Well, we've got a resolution thanking you for your 14 years of service, and hope that working in Norman will be just as meaningful as it has here. And I will ask you too. What have we done? What have we really done good?
Well, they've changed quite a bit recently, and over the past 4 or 5 years. So it's really expanded. We've got them running till midnight now. So hopefully we'll get all the people to work that need to be there.
What can we do better?
Well, these gentlemen and those gentlemen get together and talk all the time, so I'll just say keep their head down and keep moving.
Keep them working, huh? All right. All right. Well, here's your retirement resolution, and we thank you for your 14 years of service, and hope that you enjoy retirement, even though you're going to keep working a little bit. So, Thank you. Are we going to make our presentation, do you want to now, or our awards from last night? Do you want to say something now, or wait for, I mean, I see all these awards.
Yeah, we can go ahead and talk about them, sure. Michael, did you have anything in particular that you had prepared? Okay, well then let's just talk about them. So last night was the Oklahoma Transit Association's winter conference, and we were fortunate enough to be awarded with some different areas of recognition. And so I don't know, Barney, Trustee Sipner was in attendance with us, and did you want to add anything or talk about the awards specifically?
Well, no, it made us real proud of our transit system winning the System of the Year award and also the Marketing System award for Embark. It was a great evening.
Yeah, and we also received an award from FTA Region 6. They attend that banquet and present various awards to transit agencies, and we received an award in the urban category for grants and administration management. So that was a real surprise for us because, of course, for the System of the Year award, we applied for it and were fortunate enough to receive it. And then the one from the FTA was a complete surprise. So very, very good. And just really, I would say just, and it's what my comments were last night, was it really just, really is a reflection of the leadership of Cotpa and of the staff and the frontline managers. It's really a reflection of what everybody does each and every day. So we're proud to receive them.
Well, I would think the trustees would be most proud of the grants, because without doing a good job there, then we really are in trouble. So congratulations on that award. All right. Do we have any citizens to be heard? If not, we've got several minutes. We have our minutes from our board meeting in January. Do I hear any trustees have any changes or comments? If not, I'll have a motion to approve those minutes.
Move approval.
All in favor? Opposed? Then we had a parking committee meeting on January 22nd. Any changes? Any of the members of the committee? And I guess the committee members are the ones that have to make a motion.
Move approval.
Okay, thank you. And all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. And then we had a joint finance and transportation committee meeting on January 29th. So I'd have the same move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Consent docket, kind of a short consent docket, only 4 items on the consent docket. Any of the 4 items the trustees would like comment on? Then I would have a motion to approve our consent docket.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Items for individual consideration, also 4 items. Item A is the purchase of a 2012 model year 40 diesel hybrid propulsion manufactured demo bus from Nova Bus. And in the Transportation Committee meeting, we had quite a discussion on our bus new orders and CNG, and I don't know, Jason, if you need to say anything about this one bus. It was, as I recall, a low mileage for a bus, used bus, and we can get immediate delivery on it.
Right, and that's absolutely the advantage of purchasing this bus, is we can insert it into our fleet almost immediately and be able to replace a 2002 model bus with a 2012, so it'll certainly be an upgrade.
Okay, good. Do I have a motion to approve item A? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item B is approval of agreement with the Yellow Cab Company of Oklahoma for senior congregate meal transportation. Just any comment on that? I mean, just a renewal of our current contract, I think.
Yeah, this is a new agreement with Yellow Cab to provide additional services beyond the agreement we currently have with them. And essentially, we were informed by Daily Living Centers in early January that they would no longer be able to provide some of the congregate meal and transportation they provide for seniors to allow them to go shopping. And so without that provider of services, we had to look at some other options in order to maintain our service and be able to provide those trips to those customers. And so staff solicited some quotes from different providers. Yellow Cab's always been a great partner for us in helping us fill in some of the transportation gaps that we encounter from time to time. And so they were responsive to this, and so this is an agreement with them to provide transportation for the senior congregate meal program that Daily Living Centers will no longer be able to do. The estimated cost is $5,000, and that takes us through the end of this fiscal year. So again, we had a very short time frame to be able to put this together. I commend Mary Kay and her staff in responding and getting an agreement in place basically within less than 30 days to make sure we didn't lose service. But we will be looking at other options, more long-term options, over the coming months.
And why don't you item C's with Yellow Cab too, just
right.
Review that with us, and then we can just approve both items.
Sure, and it's essentially just a companion item. One of the agreements, in fact, I think it was item C, was for the congregate meal,
Grocery.
Actually, item C was for the shopping trips, and then item D is actually the congregate meal. But again, companion item to be able to have Yellow Cab provide both of those services.
All right. Any questions? If not, I'd hear a motion to approve item B and C.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Item D is an amendment to the Kimberly Horn and Associates for the MAPS Court Ashore parking study. Now I know why Kathy's here. No. Make sure we approve this. All right.
So this amendment number 2 with Kimberly Horn, really what it's going to allow us to do is be able to work with Kimberly Horn to have them take really a more in-depth look at the potential for a additional parking garage related to the convention center area. Now, the convention center is certainly a part of what the consultant will look at in terms of their demand modeling, but also development around the convention center, different programming that's anticipated for the park. So I think the idea is we'll have the consultant kind of take all those different uses and events that create demand for parking and have them further refine the demand for parking in that area. And then in addition to some of that modeling, what they're going to do is they will actually go so far as to work with us on some conceptual site plans for the garage, help us identify maybe the best location for the garage in that area, or at least give us some options to look at, and then even do some financial modeling. Part of the agreement is up to 6 different pro formas that they'll look at. And that'll give us an idea of, what we could anticipate in terms of revenues and expenditures and so forth that would be associated with an additional garage as we get further along in that decision-making process. So that'll be glad to answer any other questions.
All right.
I just wanted to point out that when Jason and I talked about this, and I believe I said it at the parking committee meeting, that it was very critical that this study encompassed the information that we would need as we prepared for a bond issue for a parking garage. I think we all know that that there's demand for a structured parking facility in that area, and that we will need to move in a flexible way when that occurs, and that we will need to move quickly. And I hope that this study, I've been assured that this study will include that information. It may need to be refreshed depending on the timing of the bond sale, but I think it's very critical that we have this information so that we can move in an expeditious way when it's time to do this.
All right, thank you. Craig, did you want to say something? No, okay. Any other questions concerning item D? Then I would have a motion to approve item D.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next item is ratification of claims and payroll. Any of the trustees have any questions or concerns? If not, I'd have a motion to ratify. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next is receive our financial reports, and as Jason pointed out from our Finance Committee, they were going to make some changes to the presentation of our financial reports to make it a little clearer and easier to understand, and as he told me, the new statements in our book mirrored what we talked about in the Finance Committee, and so, Jason, if you'd like to review those.
Sure. Yes, so we were able to review the new format of our financial statements with the Finance Committee on January 29th. And so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking not only about some of our expenditures and revenues, but also just pointing out some of the differences in the format. And we appreciate the support of the Finance Committee in helping us refine these. And I do think we accomplished our goal, which was to make the statements a little bit more straightforward, hopefully a little easier to read, but at the same time provide more information. So that was our goal. And as you look at the reports now and in the future, if there's any modifications that you would like us to consider, please don't hesitate to reach out to staff and let us know what those thoughts are. But what I thought I would do is actually start on page 1 of the financial report. And this is a report that combines all of the operations, the parking, transportation, river cruises, and you'll notice Spokies is now a separate enterprise that we're reporting in our monthly financials. So on page 1 here, this is our combined authority operations, and what I would recommend is if you really want just the overall revenues, overall expenditures at the highest level by enterprise, then this is probably the report that would provide the most meaningful information in that regard. Again, I would look at this in terms of looking at each individual business enterprise on its own. Looking at page 2, then we start getting into the breakdown of the transportation, parking, river cruises, and Spokies operations. And so I'll start by looking at page 2, the transportation operations, talking about the operating revenues. You'll notice that some of the changes in the report are centered mainly around how we've displayed the revenues. We've actually included more revenue categories, again, to give the trustees maybe a better sense of where some of our revenues come from and where the different variations are occurring. So we can talk about a few of these, starting with the top 2 lines, our fare box and our fare media sales. They continue to be above budget. You'll notice the fare box is about 106.5% of what we had projected, or about $49,000 in excess of what we had estimated. The fare media sales, that's our pass sales, like our monthly passes, our 7-day passes. You can see they're virtually right on track for being on budget. Embark Plus, this is a category that we've always reported on independent, or we've always recorded independently of the other revenues, but haven't always included it in the financial report. So this will give you an idea of the revenues derived from our paratransit service. You'll notice that we're about 6%, or I'm sorry, we're about 94% of budget, or about 6% less than what we had anticipated through this time of the year. Part of that just has to do with the demand for paratransit, where our demand continues to grow at about 2%. When we were developing the budget, we were using our last fiscal year of ridership data where we had actually seen about a 5% increase. So that variance is really due just to less growth in our paratransit operations than what we had anticipated. You'll notice our sheriff fare revenue is about 68% of budget, or right at about $21,000 under what we had expected. Sheriff fare, if you'll recall, that is our taxi voucher, our discounted taxi voucher program. And this is just a program where we've seen the revenue decline over the last few years. We've continued to adjust the budget downward, and in this case, we did not, adjust it downward enough. We're still under budget on our revenues.
Is that revenue from sale of the packets themselves?
Right. The little the
It's
coupon
not
books.
government subsidy or anything like that?
No, that hasn't changed. It's just, but the thing is, with that, with less people purchasing the discounted vouchers, it simply means we're providing less service. So it's not like we have the same level of expenses with less revenue. They kind of follow each other.
And Jason, isn't it possible that there's less demand for that service as we've improved the route timing and the availability of evening service and that sort of thing on our regular routes?
Yeah, it certainly could be a factor, and I'm not too sure if that's not also a factor on our paratransit. Why it's still growing, but it wasn't growing our ridership hasn't been growing at the pace it was, even 2 years ago, because there are more options now for people to use our fixed route service than what we've had in the past.
So possibly that could attribute some to the 106% on the fare box.
That's right. That's right. And then moving down to federal grants, we're at about 90% of our anticipated revenue budget on our federal grant reimbursements. And again, we seek reimbursement as we have the expenses. So if our reimbursements are less than what we had budgeted, that simply means our expenses are less than what we had expected as well. I do think we'll probably close that gap when we look at next month's financials. I do know that we have a reimbursement request that we'll be processing soon for reimbursement for the Unified Planning Work Program, which basically reimburses some staff time for different planning activities. I know that we're in the process of preparing that. And then the other thing I would point out is our state government subsidy. You'll notice it's showing to be about $341,000 over budget, and that's simply timing. We had anticipated receiving that first payment from the state in the second half of the fiscal year. This financial statement is through December 31st. We actually received it in the first half of the fiscal year. If you look at our overall total operating revenues with the pluses and the minuses, we're right at about 100.9%, or right on budget with our operating revenues. Even backing out that overage from the state, we're at about 98%, so very close on overall operating revenues. Looking down at our operating expenditures, on the new format, the operating expenditure categories are similar to what we've looked at in the past, but you will notice we've actually broke out fuel into its own separate line. As you note, it's about half of our overall supplies budget, and it's one that can significantly impact our budget depending on whether fuel prices are higher or lower than what we had budgeted. So we thought it was probably worth creating an individual category for fuel. So looking at our overall expenditure budget, you can see we're at about 88.7% of what we had projected through 6 months of the fiscal year. Looking at the column actual revenues versus expenditures year to date, you can see our revenues exceed our expenditures by $952,000 through 6 months of the fiscal year. Our ending fund balance, or reserves that we keep in our our operations, is about $5.1 million. Looking over next page, page 3, is our parking operations. And again, you'll see operating revenues divided into a few more categories. So rather than rolling up one revenue for parking revenues in general, we have divided that out into monthly contract, transient, and event revenues. And you can see we're over on our monthly contract revenue. We're at about 107.7% of the budget, a little under on our transient at 88% of our budget. And then our event revenue, you'll notice, is considerably over budget, 172% of what we had estimated, or $395,000 more. And I will say the reason for that is we've had one large customer pay for basically all of their event parking in in the first half of the fiscal year. We anticipated receiving it later on in the year. So if you were to back out that amount, we're still at about 104% of budget overall, even taking out that large one-time payment on the event revenue. Then looking at our operating expenditures, our parking garage operations and our other services and fees, I would just ask the trustees to consider those two at this point in time as really kind of one expenditure category. And what I mean by that is our parking garage operations budget is a little bit overstated, and our other services and fees is a little bit understated. And part of that is just when we went into to break these operating expenditures up into individual categories, we actually needed to move some of the chargeback budget from our parking garage operations down to our other services and fees. So we'll make that adjustment. We do pay what we call an internal service chargeback for some of the services that the city provides to support our operations, whether it be IT or accounting. And on this particular breakout, this particular financial, we have a lot of our chargeback budget up in parking and garage operations, where it should be in other services and fees. So we had that when we reallocate that, you'll see that negative $35,000 in the other services and fee go away. The other thing I would mention are our parking garage operations, actual revenues of just a little bit over parking garage operations, actual expenditures of $1,010,820. That includes 5 months worth of expenditures for the reimbursement we provide to Republic Parking for their expenses in running our garages. You'll notice the financial statement itself is actually through 6 months. So we had a timing issue there where we didn't get the invoice paid in time to reflect it in this financial. So the parking garage operations amount is understated by about $200,000. So if you included that in there, we'd still be at about 86% overall on our parking garage operations when you look at expenses versus budget. So all in all, our actual revenues have exceeded our expenditures year to date by about $2.2 million. Our ending fund balance is $7.6 million in our parking operations. Looking at our next page, on page 4, looking at our river cruise operations, again, we've broke out the revenues into more categories. You'll notice general fares, specialty cruises, charters, and concessions. Our general fares, which is really the fares we generate from our transit service along the river, you'll notice are actually exceeding the budget. We're at about 107% of what we had projected, or $1,300 over. On the other hand, specialty cruises, charters, and concessions are all considerably under budget. In fact, if you'll look at those three variances of 2458, 16644, and 098, you'll notice we're about $32,200 under budget on our revenues with those three categories. And that is primarily due to the lack of charters that we had in May. In fact, I think we didn't have any charters due to the lack of service. If you recall, in May we had an extremely wet month. We had lots of issues with the river. We couldn't run service, so it really took a hit on our charters. And then the other piece of that is we have backed off on our specialty cruises. We're not scheduling as many specialty cruises. It's obviously impacting our specialty cruise and concession revenue, but at the same time we purposely schedule less of those specialty cruises in order to help us manage our expenditure budget. And you'll notice our expenditure budget is right on track at about 97.6 of our expenditure budget is 97.6% of what we'd anticipated through the year. So we're right on track with our expenditures, which is certainly an improvement over where we've been looking at the last year or two, where we've tried to dial that expenditure budget into where we think it ought to be. So overall, in the river operations, our operating income exceeds our expenditures by about $76,812. Our fund balance in our river operations is $168,860. And then the last financial statement I would share with you is our Spokies enterprise. And again, this is a new financial statement that we haven't included previously. There's not a lot of different revenues and expenditures that come into this operation, but looking at our revenues, you'll see that we have most of our revenue comes from the general fund subsidy that supports the bike share operation. And then you'll also notice the very top line under the operating revenues is our actual bike share fees, what the users pay to, or what our customers pay to use the bikes. You'll notice we're about about $15,000 under budget on where we had expected to be at year to date. And the revenue for the bike share is a little bit unique in that it's collected actually in the city's general fund, and then we would, in anticipation of supporting the expenditures for the bike share operation, look at transferring that from the general fund over to the Spokies bike share operation. So right now we've actually collected about $16,827 in bike share fees in the general fund. And then on the operating expenditures, we continue to be under budget. We're at about 85% of what we had expected. Our fund balance in Spokies ended at $82,529. And so with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions on the financials.
Well, I think the new format, as the Finance Committee brought up, is really clarifies things and makes it easier to understand. And Craig, I mean.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate the effort from the Cotpa staff, from Melissa and Jason, and the work that they did. And then Mark Matthews is here. He's with our Accounting Services Division. They provide the report or prepare the report each month, working with Melissa. And I just appreciate all their work in trying to make this more clear and transparent to everyone. So it's a really good job.
All right. Have a motion to receive our financial reports? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, our program reports. Transit system report is first.
Mr. Chairman,
Good morning.
trustees, good morning. Nice to see you. Last night was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. I would like to touch on 4 topics regarding the December 2015 transit report and provide a quick modern streetcar status update. The 4 items I'd like to touch on are safety, ridership, on-time performance, and our report card. We were responsible for 6 preventable accidents during the month of December 2015, which is 1 less than the previous 2 months and 6 more than we would like. I can tell you that 3 of the accidents were generated by the same operator who has decided to take another career. Our 3-month rolling average for preventable accidents is 6.7 per month, and which of course is 6.7 more than we want. We had 10 non-preventable accidents. There were a couple real icy days. Our ridership, if you take a quick look, you'll see that we achieved 10,788 ridership or passengers in our fixed route Monday through Friday ridership, which is a slight increase, 1.6% over the previous year. Now, part of what contributed to that low increase is that the 2 weekdays closest to Christmas, we transported fewer than 50% of our normal passengers. That same dynamic affected our downtown Discovery Monday through Friday, where those 2 days, it's odd, but the 2 weekdays closest to Christmas provided us with 1/3 of our downtown Discovery passengers. Year to date, we're at a overall cumulative fixed route ridership of 4.5% greater than the previous year. New night service. New night service, we provided transportation for approximately the same number of riders, 157 compared to the previous month, which was 158. Now, if you would allow me, I'll leapfrog ahead for just a quick view into our route, our new night service, new route service, which is routes 5 and 13, but only with your permission.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, we're just so thrilled, and so are our passengers. Just a quick look at the 8 days that we provided this new service. We averaged over 100 riders per night, and on our largest night, we experienced 127 passengers. And as you can see, after months on the initial night service, we had 157. So we did 127, and we're just thrilled. And of course, there are a whole bunch of things along with that, not the least of which is the effective advertising campaign. But frankly, people were lined up saying, when is the new service going to happen? And those people, each one of them, are appreciative of you all allowing us to provide expanded night service. Those guys, as we were discussing last night, that ride those buses need to ride those buses. Thank you for that.
I just, while we're on the topic of night service, I just wanted to mention that, Michael, I've noticed a lot of the posters up around downtown, and I've also followed some social media that shows that some people are doing pub crawls on our buses at night. So maybe you could put some of those posters up at the bars.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, Trustee Johnson, because last night during the awards where we hadn't even applied for the marketing award, they gave it to us, and one of the items that was brought up when they were presenting it was that it wasn't that we put a whole lot of money into this. We put those posters downtown that some small transit organization could follow our lead and stimulate ridership with those innovative ideas. But that is one of the points that they brought up. Okay, on-time performance. You'll see that our on-time performance was 63.57, which is a very slight increase from the previous month. And there are a couple of things that we've implemented that are going to assist us in continuing to increase, and not the least of which is running the projector right now. Okay, our report card. Our number of passengers, and once again, I'm just going to go through the percentages. Our number of passengers, and this is compared year to date to our targets, is the number of passengers per service hour is 97%. The number of passengers is 101%. The on-time bus arrivals, which we're working on, is 88%. Number of miles driven between road calls is 127%. Number of accidents per 100,000 miles we're at 180%. The number of passenger claims, we're at 91%. Passenger claims is good. Number of accidents is bad. I'd be glad to answer any questions before I just spring into a real quick update on the modern streetcar status.
Okay, go. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
The first part is what have we been doing? Almost on a daily basis, we work with the MAPS 3 office and their streetcar consultants with our own consultants. And I'd like to say that the MAPS office under the direction of David Todd has just been wonderful to work with, and we're talking architects and engineers and all these guys hashing all of these little plans out that not only were complex to begin with and something that we're somewhat inexperienced in, but it became more complex when the convention center moved, which is just fine, but everyone pulling together, and we sit in a room that gets a little sweaty for hours and hours, and everyone has, I have some good news about that too, but it's just been my pleasure to work with such a cohesive and innovative and intelligent group. Okay, our operations, there were, after seemed like years of different plans, there were 12 were selected, 12 operating routes to best achieve the things that we wanted. We also looked at some very innovative ideas that we're going to be able to present later that will assist in covering spikes in ridership from special events. There were some wonderful ideas that came out. And also we're looking at our consultant with us, Mr. Rick Gustafson, is looking at 3 management options. Have Cotpa and Embark take over the modern streetcar operation, have a limited management contract with some third-party provider with our employees and some management portion or doing a turnkey. And so all those are being evaluated that we will be presenting to you, and you can give us some guidance, and then we'll put out an RFP. The storage and maintenance facility, the mainline track, right, we're at 95% design completion almost, and this is an amazing, wonderful thing. The Citizens Subcommittee unanimously agreed on one of those 12 routes. You can probably look at Jason and see he's smiling because it's the ones that we really wanted. The storage and maintenance facility is nearing 95% completion, and the vehicle procurement with Brookville, if the negotiations aren't down there mighty tight. We were at a nice meeting at 7 o'clock the other morning wrangling around over the types of locks on the doors. So that's the modern streetcar status update also. Any questions?
What most systems, as far as management options are concerned, what's the predominant model?
Well, and I know a lot about that. I appreciate you asking me that. Generally, the top 3 positions, if we're talking a management contract, and it generally, but anyway, it's normally the top 3 positions, and then they report to us, and our employees report to them through us on the side. Now, in my experience, and it's extensive, most management contracts, that are just management only, are the result of an established operation that isn't working too well, and experts are brought in to get it back on track. It'd be fairly rare to have a management contract with a new enterprise. I worked for First Group, which is like the world's largest transportation provider, and spent years on these things, including the Oklahoma City Solid Waste Department.
In addition to that, I think most of the operations are some type of turnkey, because they're in a similar situation to us where we don't have that in-house experience. We don't have anybody on staff that's driven or worked on a streetcar. So one of the ways to do that is to bring a private contractor that's run those systems in other locations in to assist and get the operations set up and take care of the day-to-day. And so that's very common. It's not the only way to do it, but it is very common.
So anyway, the study's going to give us these options and
It is, yes.
we'll determine how we want to operate it.
Pretty much. And of course, the board will provide the direction of which of those. The pluses and minuses will be defined by our very capable fellow who's going to prepare those RFPs at your direction.
But you've already volunteered that you've been through this. So.
Oh, believe me, I'm strong in a number of areas, but I'm the king of those.
Okay, well, good. All right, any questions? All right, thank you for that report.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Our long-range plan, Larry, going to...
Sure. Hey, January has gotten the year off to kind of a fast start in terms of planning and a lot of things that are medium-term and longer-term. And really, 2 of them had to do with some very forward-thinking grant applications that the city and Cotpa have been working on together. Kevin's talked about the streetcar route planning. January was a very, very busy month. You've talked about the night service. And, I just kind of like to add a perspective that if you stop and think about it, that average for those 8 days doesn't make a trend. Gosh, that's 2/3 what the other 2 routes were doing in November and December. So, and those are off to a good start. But also say a little bit of a word about something that's kind of long range that's happening really beyond us, but we've been asked to provide information. The Alliance for Public Transportation did basically have people come to some national webinar back in January that dealt with dedicated funding, something that the long-range plan and that ACOG talks about with the Regional Transit Authority. Chairman Kaufman came, and actually there have been some meetings like that in the past, and 3 or 4 people show up. There was nearly 20, and I know that the APT is looking to work with some other folks to put on some type of maybe a 2 or 3 hour or half-day type of a workshop about transit in the region and start to kind of explore that a little bit more, get some awareness around that whole concept of dedicated funding and what that means to the long-range future of planning. But to kind of go back to these forward-thinking grants for just a moment, as in the past, we've reached out to the Oklahoma City Planning Department, and one of them was with some group called Growth America or something like that. They were looking for cities to propose transit-oriented development workshops. And what actually qualifies Oklahoma City is the fact that we were able to get the Tiger 5 grant. The city got the Tiger 5 grant for the Santa Fe station. And, you know, when you think about downtown, it's already pretty transit-oriented as it is, but that station is actually at the end of potential commuter rail and is definitely at the end of this Northwest Multimodal Corridor with the idea of perhaps bus rapid transit that would go out Class and then the Northwest Expressway. The Santa Fe becomes the anchor. And so that's the way we've applied or proposed this kind of a grant. It's kind of a small technical assistance grant. And as much as anything, it's a way to bring in some outside expertise for some days and get some conversation and maybe some energy around the sorts of development that can occur in conjunction with larger transit stations. You know, downtown is great, and yet not a lot of housing close to the Santa Fe, no downtown grocer, no major retail, lack of pharmacy, et cetera, no affordable housing. And as you look out Class and the Northwest Expressway, even for a bus, you know, rapid transit type option, there's a lot of opportunity there. And, you know, it's great. The Oklahoma City Planning Department really did help us in terms of trying to develop that. They have some TOD policies in the comp plan. Now the other one, and we'll know something about that in February, the other grant application, and really can't talk a lot about the details, is the Smart Cities Challenge Grant, this idea that one city in America this year is going to be awarded basically a $50 million grant to do some very futuristic and bold things. And it's not so much about building tracks or bridges or pavement. It's really about the use of information technology and about the use of smart vehicle technologies like the Google cars and charging stations and things like that. And, you know, again, we've worked closely with the Oklahoma City Planning Department and the mayor's office. We've convened some meetings of key partners like the IT department here at the city and invited a number of local private companies to also come and be part of that conversation. And that's good. You know, whether the city makes the list of finalists, which is like 5 or 6 cities that will be asked to really compete for it, and whether we get to there or not, just these contacts and these communications have been a great way to get a lot of people from different silos. You know, if you imagine a grain silo, a 6-silo grain elevator, people talking, you know, with each other and starting to have more of a little more unified view of what the future of transportation, especially when you try to use some high-tech technology, what that can mean. And the best I can say is that, you know, that proposal is, yeah, about the greater downtown area, but it's also about that northwest corridor. But it's really important to have geographic balance, and so that geography extends southward to about 59th, perhaps along Western, and out to 23rd and Martin Luther King. So it's the idea that there are some things, some big and some little things, that could be done in a lot of parts of town that benefit transit, yeah, but also do a lot to benefit motorists as well. And it's really been a great project working with the other departments and getting us all looking ahead. And we have some really bright people in the IT department, and as we said earlier, in maps and over in public works. So that's kind of where we're at. Sometimes it's just the planning that, not necessarily the grants, that helps move us forward.
What I'd like, Larry, and when you get time, maybe the next meeting or whenever, but from the workshop we attended, if you could do a brief recap of the various funding ideas that I think it was three transit associations had used for their dedicated funding, so the trustees can always have that in their packet to know that these are potential options once we get to trying to formulate dedicated funding. And I'm sure you took better notes than me. I mean, some of the funding options, I didn't even know what they were talking about, but maybe you, if you would, do you think you could do that? I mean, do you think you...
Well, I'm sure that somehow something can be provided as information, and we can boil down
just
that hour to just a very
just brief on all these different funding options that these various systems talked about.
Right. And different approaches. That's what was kind of interesting about that is, you know, there was no single cookbook approach. Definitely regions had to tailor something they knew would be locally.
And I think that would be a big part of long-range plan. If you could, when you know, kind of try to formulate that for us, I'd appreciate it. All right. Thank you. Parking system.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
We continue to oversell monthly parking and look to continue overselling monthly parking. We're pulling data from our system that will allow us to proceed with overselling monthly parking without jeopardizing going too far. Santa Fe elevator update. 3 of the 4 elevators are fully functional. We are currently working on the 4th elevator. That work started in last week of December. New motor and hoistway machinery is installed. Wiring is going to be a continuous project. We have found that we had to replace the governor rope, the safety cable. That began last week. And the cab walls and equipment started this week. The hoistway cable replacement, when we were inspecting the first elevator, the inspector noticed that elevator number 2, which we're working on right now, needed to have that cable replaced. I asked Republic Parking to get us 3 quotes. Total cost for that will be just over $13,000. Unfortunately, replacing that hoistway cable will add 35 days to the project. Substantial completion is scheduled for early March. As of December 1st, staff started inspecting each elevator every day before 7 a.m. This has allowed staff to get a hold of the repair companies to begin repairs immediately should there have been an outage over the night. In addition to that, staff is posting informational signs at those downed elevator lobbies advising the users of the garages of those outages. In January, found some interesting information. Sheridan Walker, we had 1 outage. The duration of that outage was 6 hours. Cox Center, we had no outages. That system is managed by SMG. Century Center, again, no outages. Santa Fe, we had 2 outages. Outage 1 was 2 hours and 5 minutes. A safety device had been triggered. Repair people came out and fixed it. The second outage of 27 hours and 30 minutes, unfortunately, staff turned a key in the elevator during the inspection and didn't turn it back on. So I point that out as, 1, it was an error on our part, but 2, it adds to the reliability of the elevator systems updates at Santa Fe. Arts District Garage, we had 1 outage of a very long 22 days. The reason for that length, I believe, is because of the fact that we don't have a contract with an elevator company at that garage, which will be resolved in the next couple of days. Again, the month of January, we actually had 14 days where all of our elevators were functioning properly, minus the one that's being replaced. So the proactive approach is, we're starting to see the results of that. Arts District Garage, build out phase 1. We are at the punch list for all of the current occupied spaces, along with the future Cotpa parking office and conference rooms. We have some detailed paint work that needs to be completed, some cabinet work, a few fixtures, and the HVAC system at the clinic. The work at the clinic had been planned. We have to test and balance the system, and then that should be resolved. To the conference room and the parking offices, we're working on the internet today and next week, and then we'll be able to continue with the audio-video system for the conference rooms. I believe that we'll be fully functional and be moving in the next couple of weeks to those facilities.
I have a question about the discount, the tenant lease discount for the Schools Foundation. I recognize that we've been doing that for some time. Are those restrooms now accessible to the Schools Foundation?
Yes, those facilities came available mid-January to them. They are functional.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our marketing.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, we've had a pretty busy month like everyone else, and we're excited to talk to you about how the night service promotion has kicked off. We hosted Steve Shaw with News 9 during that first week of night service, the expanded night service, I should say, and learned, too, that he's a proponent of transit personally, so that's always good to know that about your media friends, so we know who to call on. And he did a great job. He also was able to speak with many riders, and we heard some news stories about why they are using the night service, and it's just encouraging, again, not that we're just providing the services because, but because it has a need, and we're meeting that need. Trustee Johnson brought up the pub crawl. Well, I did get to participate, and it was a fun event. We had some of our advocates there who continue to help us promote. They're not users every day, but this was an opportunity for us to kind of put our best foot forward and speak to an audience that we would consider in that area of choice riders, along with many others. One thing I wanted to point out here in the larger picture, it's a little dark on the screen, but our overall experience regarding public transportation isn't just about the bus. And it's about that walking. So we're walking at that point to the next spot. And so just the continued installation of improved sidewalks and pedestrian access is critical to the overall public transit experience. And so that just shows you how close you are to a very busy thoroughfare. Some were very uncomfortable, but at the same time, it is a part of that bigger picture. But we are very grateful for the progress that's been made in that area. Next, we just show some of the discussion that took place regarding that evening. We met at 2 different places, and these were just a couple of the tweets. There were numerous pieces of social media posted, and again, I think we definitely made some friends that night. Looking forward, one thing we're doing right now is looking backwards, and that's back at our past. February marked the anniversary of Cotpa, its formation by the city in 1966. What we're doing right now is making plans to celebrate the work that you as a board has done throughout those 50 years and what it means to where we are today, but also what does it mean about where we're going tomorrow. And so we'll be planning, and we'll bring more to you to show you some of those plans, but I wanted to at least acknowledge again the work that this board and this body has done over the last 50 years, and that we're making plans to commemorate that over this next year. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Sometimes I feel like I've been on the board those whole 50 years.
So how long have you been on the board?
Well, when was Norick elected mayor?
I don't know, but I could find out. Right after that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Next day.
Awesome.
Oh, I don't know.
Next day. My first act as mayor
Yeah,
will be
what
to appoint
have I got for
Kaufman
you?
That's right.
All right. I want to, on the part of the trustees, and I'm sure that all the trustees know, the Board of Trustees report, or the format, I think is outstanding, and I think it's very helpful to all the trustees to recap what each of the program reports are. So I appreciate that format and what you're doing there.
I just want to say that the images I just saw from that pub crawl, I would hope that encouraged everyone, because when I've been fortunate in grad school or in my 20s and now to travel to a San Francisco or a Manhattan or a Washington, D.C., or any of our country's major cities, that's the experience I have. It's young people, young professionals, young working class folk, middle class folk on buses going to movies, going to the pub, going to parks. That's the reality for most of this country's major cities. And when we talk about choice riders, there they are. And I really want to applaud your outreach to every young person in this city, and the encouragement that you are putting out there for public transportation. This is so critical that we join the rest of the major cities in this country. The other thing I'd like to, so thank you. The other thing that I'd like to say, those sidewalks are so critical. Those images that we all saw of, again, tax-paying citizens walking that close to a major street on a sidewalk just to get to the next bus stop. I hope as we go forward as a city, and I've been encouraged by the support for sidewalks, but I hope as we go forward as a city, we think about how sidewalks connect our houses literally to public transportation so that we can walk from the front door to a sidewalk, to the bus stop, get on the bus, get to work, get to church, get to school, get where we need to go. I hope that when we think about public transportation, we do exactly what Michael is encouraging us to do, which is think about how we use our feet to get to each part of public transit. So thank you for talking about that, Michael. It really means a lot to me.
If I may add to that, one, it was not a criticism by any means. What it was, we wanted to just show is that that piece of infrastructure is often, a lot of times, some of the questions I field is, well, what are you going to do about it? And so that's, sometimes people think that it's up to us as a transportation committee or board to impact that as well. And that's why I bring that up. Again, it's not a criticism, but rather it's just a part of the experience of using public transit. And as we look to try to gain more ridership, those are some of the obstacles that were in front of us for sure. That's why improving the bus shelters, we spoke to them about that. We had an opportunity to speak to this group and was able to talk to them about the bus shelter improvements and the accessibility that we're requiring now as part of installing bus stops and infrastructure. So that we've made great strides, and I just can't wait to see what we do tomorrow.
Thank you. And our last item is the River Cruises and Spokies report.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd first like to say I was on the ULI pub crawl, and my friends and associates that were with me were very impressed with the cleanliness, the comfort, and the timeliness of the bus transportation. It was a very good experience.
Were you riding your bicycle, or were you?
I had my bike on the front. First of all, our ferry ridership for 2015 was up 10% over the prior year. Very happy about that. We saw our riders per service hour jump 6% above target. The 2016 schedule, which begins on April 1st, has been approved, and some very minor changes that are going to help us further increase that riders per service hour. We've also added an additional 4 specialty cruises versus what we offered last year to help grow some revenue in that area. The Devon Discovery is currently undergoing a complete overhaul and a facelift. It is completely sanded down. It's practically bare metal at this point. It'll be repainted, redecaled. Shaft bearings are being replaced. And our bow thruster, which had suffered some severe damage, is getting new propellers. So hopefully, well, obviously, by the time we start service April 1st, it'll be just like new. And then we'll begin working on the Explorer and then the Pioneer over the next few years. For Spokies, staff is working on coming close to completing negotiations for a contract for new equipment that will make the system more sustainable and more reliable. In the meantime, plans are being finalized for participation in the Bart and Nadia experience at the Cox Center. I believe that's next weekend. We're doing that in partnership with Rocktown Youth Mentoring, who does some wonderful bike safety courses, and there's actually an obstacle course that adults and kids can participate in. And then we're also working on plans for the Open Streets event on April 3rd down 23rd Street, where we hope to also have some bicycle safety education and some introductions to the Smokies program. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
How are the new bike, the refurbished, weren't you adding new bikes and new?
We took, the system started in 2012 with 100 bikes. When we took it over in 2014, it was down to 51. Of those 51, we went in and tested them for safety and were able to end up with 30 bikes. So we took those 30 bikes, had them completely refurbished, new chains. We powder coated them because they were rusting, and they look really good. And I think we're at 28 right now. We have lost a couple that these bikes were not designed for bike share. They were designed for individuals. They were not designed to be outdoors. So hopefully when we get into this new equipment that is designed to be outside in the snow and the sleet and the rain and all of that, that we'll have better success. We're also looking at GPS tracking on the bikes to make sure we know where they are at all times and be able to gather some data about where they're ridden, how often they're ridden, how far they're ridden, that sort of thing.
Well, good. Any other questions? Right, thank you. I just want to say, and I'm sure Jason, when we start at the top, Jason expresses his appreciation to all the staff, but I'm telling you, from the trustees and from the chairman, I think the city and Embark and Jason are very fortunate to have the dedicated staff that we have for each of our programs or each of the venues. I mean, every one of you that give reports are very interested in making your responsibilities the best they can be. And I want to say thank you, and I'm sure Jason thanks you every day, or I hope he does. But no, so, all right. Do I have a motion to receive our program reports?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any items from the trustees? Councilman? No.
Jason may have already decided to include this in his remarks, but I wanted him to talk a little bit about the CNG bus purchase. I think many of us were there for the committee meeting, but I think it would be helpful to say it in full trust also, so that we're all aware of what's happening with that CNG bus purchase.
Yeah, be glad to speak to that. Right, so the Transportation Committee that met on January 29th approved the purchase of 6 CNG 40-foot heavy-duty transit buses from a New Flyer contract that we've been able to work with DART down in Dallas to secure some options from. We are in the process of kind of reviewing some final documentation and working with the FTA on that purchase. So we did not get everything we wanted to get accomplished done in time to get an actual agenda item for the approval of that bus purchase on this agenda. Because of the timing and the scheduling with the bus manufacturer, in order for us to be able to receive delivery for those buses in 8 to 10 months, which is what they are projecting, we need to get our order in as early as possible. So once we have our documentation wrapped up, we plan to proceed with issuing a PO to New Flyer and bringing an item to the trustees in March, ratifying the actions of the administrator to move forward with that bus purchase.
All right. Any other comments, Jason?
Just to follow your lead, Mr. Chairman, on recognizing staff, and particularly in light of the award we received for System of the Year, and I know I mentioned it, but just want to make sure that I do say it loud and clear that it's not only the division heads and the managers that help make our system what it is, but it's our frontline staff. It's the staff we have that are cleaning the buses and working on them in the middle of the night, the operators that come in at 4 a.m. To make sure that they're ready for lineup. So again, I think it's just a reflection of the entire team, and grateful to be part of it.
All right. Hear a motion to adjourn? Or do we need it? All right. Thank you.